and Garrett Ross running the mothership here on 365 Sports. Here are the top 4 seeds in the NCAA men's basketball tournament. This after the feat of Kyle Boone. Obviously, it's pretty obvious. Most of them, anybody there among the top 4 seeds in any of the regions that you wonder, and that means you'd have to replace them with somebody. And I got to tell you, Baylor at a 3 seed kind of surprised me. I thought they might lose traction, especially getting blown out by Iowa State, and then they hammered Houston. But any of those top 4 seeds, do you see somebody that you question among any of them?
No, I think they got the top part of it all right. I mean, there's a lot of questions about some of the other seeds in the bracket and, who's in, one of the playing games in particular lower down. But I think the top 4 were all right, especially, 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of got obvious, especially after Tennessee lost so early on in the SEC tournament. It didn't matter that NC State beat North Carolina, that kind of just took Tennessee down to the 2 line. I think Auburn will be maybe the most underseeded team of all of them at 4 because they seem like they can do a whole lot more than a lot of teams can. But again, you kind of played your way into all this for everyone. So I don't have a problem with any of them.
The only thing that jumped off to me was North Carolina as a 1 seed over Iowa State initially. And then when I read the explanation of where their non-conference schedule ranked compared to Iowa State's, which Iowa State's was just horrific. I mean, like 350th or whatever it was.
I think it was in the upper 200s. Yeah.
I don't know. I
Maybe
think
worse.
I think it was actually worse. I think it was in the 300s. But regardless, that was the explanation or one of the reasons given as to why North Carolina got that nod over Iowa State, because where Iowa State was in the hundreds, North Carolina was a top 40. So you can see where that's just, you give them credit for having the better schedule, and that gets them the nod. But, Iowa State, I don't think, is drowning their sorrows too much. They had a big weekend. And so, that number 2 seed will just add a little chip more to that shoulder that's already got a pretty massive chip on it, just because that's pretty much how they're engineered in Ames. And so, nothing totally shocking. I'm not an expert bracketologist,
right.
So I'm sure there's people who are like, that should have been a 4 instead of a 3. And I'll default to those folks who know better. But, nothing that jumps off the page. But I did think the Cyclones had a pretty good shot at the number 1, but I get it.
All right, Garrett, let me ask you this. The number 1 overall seed was UConn.
Mm-hmm.
Iowa State, there were thoughts it could be a 1 seed. Craig was just bringing that up.
Mm-hmm.
So if UConn's the number 1 seed, that means Iowa State was the 8th team.
Correct.
Which that was kind of a surprise, and that also might answer what the committee was doing. Again, if you're an Iowa State fan, you're pissed, you're angry. Well, go keep winning. Now, go back to that group. Go back to that image one more time, and then Craig, you followed up with this. In the East region, those 4 teams all just won their tournament conference championships. Every one of them. UConn, Iowa State, Illinois, and Auburn. That was something that I think there's a separate tweet on. You don't have to use it now, Garrett, but there we are. Craig?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a loaded region. That's odd how it worked out to where you have all of the conference champs sitting right there bunched up together. Don't know how, intentional that was or how that just seemed to spit out, and that's what they ended up with. But, I mean, there's definitely some different things that you can look at and position a different way. What were you saying right before that, though? Because you wanted to show that, but
I was saying that Iowa State, we thought, or at least in discussion, that they could move up to the number 1 seed line. But they're in the same region as the number 1 overall team in the country and the number 1 overall seed in UConn. Placed in that region means that they would have been the number 4, number 2 seed to be in the UConn region.
I know what I was thinking of now. Yeah, Jeff Capel and Clemson's whining as well seemed to have an impact when talking about the non-conference schedules. They're little I won't call it a fit because it wasn't that extreme, but they're very public, and just timing-wise, the ACC suddenly wanted to speak up a bit about the Big 12 and its non-conference scheduling and its rankings and how those were formulated. And so I don't know if that got into the head of the committee or not. I know Twitter, which, hey, take it for what it's worth, but
Jeff
Twitter
Capel,
seems to think that it got into people's heads.
Jeff Capel had no place.
No, he was
his
politicking. He was
Yeah,
politicking for his team to get in. Yeah.
Because his team was 343rd in the
Right.
schedule ranking. So,
Right.
he was maybe just trying to say, like, if you're going to say this about us, you have to say that about them. You can't say it for every team in the Big 12, though.
No.
I think, when you look at Baylor, Kansas, Houston, Tech, like some of these teams in particular, they had pretty good non-conference schedules. I think Kansas played 3 of the 4 1 seeds and beat 2 of them. So,
And they're the ones that are propped up as somebody who did. But if you read just some of the write-ups, that message from Jeff Capel and the Clemson coach, his name's slipping my mind. I apologize. But that is in many articles that are talking about where Big 12 teams are ranked. So I don't know if it got through to the committee or not, but it got through to some of the journalists, which isn't hard to do. You just feed them and they repeat it. But that clearly resonated, at least in the descriptions of where teams ended up. And so I can imagine a scenario where, maybe that slipped into some of the conversation with the committee and how they decided to rank some of the Big 12 teams. Again, that's not the example for every single one of them, but that is something that I've seen mentioned multiple times now in multiple write-ups ever since the ACC had their politicking the other day. So
right.
Take that for what it's worth.
We're going to get into politicking and also those who have comments about this and that are in positions of power or not. This is an interesting tweet. Since 2002, this is something that, now read it. Every team that has won the NCAA tournament in the last 21 years has been inside the top 40 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. That means you can't be 27-1 and 63 in another. This year, 12 teams in that category: UCM, UConn, Purdue, Duke, Arizona, Auburn, Houston, Creighton, Marquette, North Carolina, Colorado, Tennessee, and Nebraska. And I didn't include that because it had Nebraska, who's going to open up against A&M, and the former AD is now there. But then turn the page on yet another tweet. Since Ken Palm's analytics began in 2002, every national champion but one has been top 25 in both offensive and defensive efficiency, top 25, not 40, and that includes this list of the same teams but minus a few others: Arizona, Auburn, UConn, Creighton, Houston, Marquette, North Carolina, and Purdue, who traditionally can scare the hell out of you if you're a Boilermakers fan when it comes to a tournament game. So there we are with a couple of trends, analytics, facts, figures, etc. on those are the teams that it looks like will be the one of those 8 will win the national title.
Yeah, I would say that Auburn is a 4 seed, and so they're the lowest one among all those.
Arizona's a 2 seed.
Creighton is a 3. Marquette's a 2. You've got all the 1 seeds in there. So Auburn's the lowest seed out of that who could reasonably win. And like I said before, when you watch them play, they get so aggressive defensively, and they can really get hot on going scoring streaks inside and outside with what they have. So I would be concerned. The only problem Auburn really has in this is that of all the things they could have drawn overall, they drew UConn in their side of the bracket, who is probably is obviously the number 1 overall seed, and it's hard for me to wrap my head around seeing them lose, but that's also bad news. Like, I would say that's the worst news UConn got is that Auburn is in there, and Bruce Pearl and those guys are scared of no one.
Well, Illinois, again, all those teams in that same region all just won the conference championship, which sometimes mean nothing. We'll have a stat on winning the conference championship at what it might mean when it comes to the tournament. Baylor is a top 3 seed. Now, I got to tell you, at times you wonder. Now, they had that nice run right before the end. They did win their first tournament game in Kansas City against Cincinnati. They're the only school to be a top 3 seed in each of the last 4 tournaments. So they have that nice little trend going for Scott Drew and company. In fact, here's a comment, a real quick little nugget from Scott Drew yesterday evening once the tournament bracket was unveiled.
This team finished with the number 1 strength of schedule in the country. I mean, there's 363 schools. That's like hitting the lottery to have the number 1 strength of schedule. And we went against the number 1 ranked defense in the country. So definitely been proven and battle tested. But probably the thing I'm most proud about is we're the only school that's had 4 straight top 3 seeds in the NCAA tournament. And there's a lot of great programs, a lot of great coaches, a lot of great tradition, but to be the only school to be a top 3 seed the last 4 years really is something that our administration, our fan base, our players, staff can be really proud of.
All right, so there's that. Now, what is the one